pioneers and presenters and audience to join us. I think we should start with the session. So a very good afternoon and good morning to all the participants of panel 18. I would like to introduce my co-panelists, Emma Nawaz from Lahore School of Economics. Aisha Subhani, I think she'll join us in a while. She's also from Lahore School of Economics. Asad Khaleh, he'll also join us soon. He's from University of Liverpool, and Issam Malki from University of Westminster. So before starting off with the presentations, I would briefly go through the fundamental theme of our panel. It basically highlights one of the major issues that is emerging in the global South. Although infrastructure-led development projects, they are believed to have a positive impact on human development, leading to sustainable urban futures. However, in urban cities of global South, they are generally carried out in a way that violates human rights by depriving the affected people, especially the displaced residents, of their economic assets, thus undermining their social quality. In addition to this, the rehabilitation and resettlement of the displaced families is quite difficult and is marred by weak political institutions, leading to a remote possibility of just sustainable futures. Particularly, the process of land acquisition and compensation is heavily politicized, where the power dynamics or the power politics, they play a crucial role. And generally, the evidence also suggests that among the displaced residents, those who hold strong political networks or patronage systems, they are most likely beneficiaries at the cost of majority of other displaced or the poor residents. And this signifies that the political power is being exercised in an undemocratic way. So consequently, this leads to inequalities among displaced residents, particularly, and it undermines the cause of just sustainable urban futures at large. So against this backdrop, this panel is going to explore the critical role of political networks in determining the future of many displaced residents because of the infrastructure-led development, especially in global South. And the papers that we have accepted, they're aligned with this theme. So before proceeding with the presentations, I would like to talk about the timing. So for each paper, a total of 10 to 12 minutes will be allocated, in which the presenter has to pitch in for 6 to 7 minutes, and followed by the discussant comments and question and answer session, after which the floor will be opened also for the question and answer session. So the first presentation that we have is by Ezana Hedis from the University of Manchester. It is a very interesting research on strategic response to clientelism, where the quiet encroachers, they seek formal housing through partisanship in the capital city of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. So Ezana, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is the thank you for the introduction, Faria. The paper that I'm proposing is still a work in progress, and I highly appreciate your comments, your suggestions very much. So what I'm basically in line with the theme that Faria have tried to briefly introduce, is that what I'm trying to show is how the weak, the poor, the vulnerable, or the disadvantaged groups try to create this kind of political relations, to get a better outcome during eviction. So what I'm trying to capture is a strategy that was adopted by, quiet encroachers or informal residents in Addis Ababa who build their housing on urban, on government-owned land, And this strategy, I called it seeking urbanization, seeking formalization through partisanship. It transpires, or this kind of strategy, emerges in a state where the state is very much repressive, where it sees it considers development as a security, where development is securitized. Any resistance against the government-led development interventions are crushed brutally by the government, repressed by the government, because they are considered as treasoners or anti-state. And also this kind of strategy emerged in a state where the government is actively involved in facilitating the development, in providing housing, in improving infrastructure, in facilitating social services. And also at the same time where the government is known to use state resources to buy political support, to expand its party membership, using, job opportunities, business opportunities, to expand its party base, to expand its support base. Additionally, it's also in a context where the state and the party are, fused, where it's a party state. It's very difficult to, make a differentiation in that context. So, and also the state is, intervenes at the lower level. So when, this informal residents, when they find themselves in this kind of political context, what they did in the middle of 2000, between 2012-13 until 2017, what they did was they since during this inner city redevelopment that was going on in Addis, they were not entitled to get replacement housing because they don't have formal tenure. So what they come up is that they consider that the government or the ruling party provides some benefits and services for its party members. So to benefit from or to get replacement housing, they become actively involved in the party election campaign, in start attaching their party membership, and applying for replacement housing. Here's something that I forgot to mention, is that the government, for those informal households, it have this the poorest of the poor scheme. For formal house, for those who have formal tenure, they automatically would get replacement housing. But for the informals, there is a limited opportunity. If they qualify to be the poorest of the poor, they would get replacement housing, formal replacement housing, but in a dilapidated, found in a dilapidated condition. So to, since this, to benefit from this limited opportunity, that the informal residents, they try to adopt this partisanship, this becoming involved in the ruling party election campaign, even some of them in informing the movement of the opposition. So I found this this strategy very much interesting because it emerged when clientelism or clientelist relationship becomes an established norm, or when it's institutionalized. So in normal clientelist relations, there would always be two parties that would negotiate, to give political support in response to personal or collective benefit. But in this context, without the need to, negotiate, or without the need, to guarantee that they would get a housing in return, these people offered their political support or their services to the ruling party because they don't have an option. But I see this as not as see this informal settlement, informal residents, not as passive victims, but as clever, astute agents, which critically see, which critically analyze their situation and strive to benefit from a limited opportunity that they have within the broader disadvantaged structural condition that they found themselves in. And if their gamble succeeds, they would get a formal housing, and if they get a formal housing, even though it's dilapidated, they might have a chance to benefit from the government's, mass housing scheme. So that's what they were strategy. They were trying to get to transform their illegally or informally gained advancement into legality, and then with possibility it might expand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zana. Your presentation was quite insightful. So it presents basically a different perspective. Normally, displaced families, they show resentment and they're reluctant. But in your scenario, they're actually forming a sort of alliance with the ruling party. So this presentation presents different perspectives. So I have a few questions. You mentioned in your presentation that the ruling party, they were, at that time, they were preparing for the elections. So the poorest of the poor, they were supporting the party in terms of the election campaigns as well, if I'm right? So after the party, if the party it came into power, did the poorest of the poor, like you mentioned, did they get the formal housing, first of all? And secondly, have you done any follow-up after, if they did get the formal housing? So did you just revisit those families and to look at how they are, doing in the current times? And apart from this, what is the criteria to judge poorest of the poor, who can get formal housing? So I have these few questions, and if any other panelists or participants, they want to ask any questions, please do. Are there any questions?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, hi, everybody. It's quite a very interesting presentation. Just a couple of questions I have, in fact, a couple of comments as well. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Okay, now what you mentioned in your presentation as well, you coined that term, seeking formalization through partnership, SFTP. It's very interesting, the transition from informality towards the formal ownership. Now, what I'm really curious about the whole episode of this transition from informality towards formality is the political power behind it. Because you have gone through a qualitative study, you mentioned in your presentation, you have interviewed more than 50, I guess, stakeholders into it. So probably better in terms of the power involved, the power dynamics involved into the whole process. Now there are two of those key stakeholders, the ones who, one section who didn't have that formal ownership, and versus the ruling party, which is, I guess, EPRDF, and I think it's probably a democratic party, and they are in power for some time, like 15 to 20 years. So these are the two major stakeholders. Now, of course, both have their vested interests. The ruling party, they want to, continue with their regime, and elections are coming up. And of course, the other ones, the marginalized people who don't have that legal ownership of entitlement of any land, of course, they have their vested interests as well. and you're finding that it's without any expectations and without any promise, the whole transition worked. But I'm still interested in, is it really from the marginalized perspective, the people who didn't have that entitlements, would they be so much politically conscious about, or it's just, you know, a matter of their survival that they, you know, they somehow aligned with the ruling party? And of course, to what extent the ruling party, they had their vested interest in winning the elections, because of course it's in all these developing countries, and your country is no exception, you know. This is in all the manifestos, you know, this is the number one thing, that to you know, help the marginalized people. That is the manifesto, that is the point number one everywhere. So what exactly you think is, you know, in terms of political part, which really dominates, you know? So the number one, one question is, and the second one is already, I think Faria has asked, because now it's since 3 or 4 years have gone. So that party is still their rule, and what about the entitlements? Because what you presented is that it's still question marks about their, you know, legal entitlement or their, you know, citizenship about the whole thing. So I'm really interested in knowing that what exactly they find it, what they really strive for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed Nawaz. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yes, so just a quick addition to what both Ahmed and Faria have mentioned. Well, Izana, thanks for this. Thanks for the presentation. The questions which I wanted to ask have been mentioned by both of the previous discussants. So one is that, where do these people stand currently? What's their situation? And the second thing is that, how many people are we talking about? Like in terms of numbers, how many are they? And what exactly is their current situation? If you've done any follow-ups. Right, thanks. That's all that I wanted to.
Thank you, Dr. Asad. So, Izana, please answer the questions.
Thank you very much. One of the, you know, the issue of the follow-up has come, and I didn't do much of a follow-up, especially once I finished my research project. I moved on to another research project that's a fault in my part. But one of the things, even during the time scope of my research, some people have managed to get formal housing, and some of them didn't. And so some of them, you know, managed to get the formal housing, and some of them didn't. And the reason that I really didn't want to go, that I wasn't interested in the outcomes, I'm much more focused on the strategy, because these groups are very minority. Like we all know that, you know, informal housings are much more, you know, the predominant one. But we are talking into the inner city of Addis Ababa, and in the inner city of Addis Ababa, even the dilapidated housing were nationalized in the mid-70s by socialist government. So most of the majority of them are formal housings. So that gives the government much more bigger leverage, because they were the minority. So that's where it comes that I was not that much focused on the outcome. Rather, I'm much more interested on the strategy of the people. And one thing that's the political consciousness, it's not, you know, my analysis, but it's what I found, you know, from talking to them. When I asked them why they were doing this, you know, as Faria said, as they are resentful of the government. But when they talk to you, why they did what they did is because they see other people benefiting by becoming a member. So that's why they become a member. So that's where the consciousness comes. And and they see far ahead that if they have a formal housing, and their aim is not to stop in getting formal housing, which is dilapidated, but in getting the mass housing. So it's not a mere survival strategy, but it's have a way of opening an opportunity. And the criteria for identifying this poorest of the poorest, that's what opens door for this favoritism or trying to score points. It was really vague, and the people who were the ranking or identifying the poorest of the poor were party members and state the district officials. So that's why these people were trying to show that they are loyal to the ruling party. I think I have addressed them in the interest of time. I'll work on your comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a small comment, if I may.
Yes, sure, Aisha. Please, go ahead.
I appreciate your presentation and in fact, the effort that you have put into this work. Now, to me, it seems like a game of interest, and that's to a win-win situation. And it's very interesting to see. It hardly happens that in this kind of, games involving odds at both ends, both parties get to get the maximum benefit out of it. So if we look at the mode of transformation from being vulnerable to coming to the other side and becoming advantageous, what is that one thing or one learning that you find was an important, which can be a replica or can be useful for any of those who are exposed to such vulnerable circumstances? I mean, I understand that the mode of transformation was not easy, and talking to the ruling party and coming to terms in negotiations is not an easy task. So what was that one smart tool that those who were expected to be the losers, they adopted, and which kind of benefited them and which could henceforth be used by many others who are exposed to such kind of vulnerable circumstances for their benefit? Thank you.
I will try to quickly respond to this. For me, we need to see how this vulnerable group respond to their disadvantaged position and work with that instead of demonizing. I mean, I know it's not an ideal situation for the people to exchange their political support in exchange for benefits, what they should get as by being citizen. But life doesn't go in most of our countries that way. So for me, it's understanding their situation and working with them might be a solution than trying to wish for a very institutionalized citizen right-based relationship, which won't come up in a short period of time in most of the global South countries.
Yeah, okay, I think
Thank you.
Zan has addressed your question. So we've taken a lot of time. So let's move on to our next presentation, and the next presentation I'll be presenting. So I'll just start off the presentation. Zana, thank you so much. Your presentation was very interesting, and thank you for answering all the questions and all the queries. It was a very insightful and an interesting research work, and we wish you all the best. So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I hope everybody can see the screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so this presentation is by me and Emma Nawaz, and we'll be discussing the role of formal and informal networks in compensation and resettlement of the displaced. So it's basically a case of a mass transit project, which is Lahore Orange Line Metro Train project in the urban city, metropolitan city of Lahore. I hope everybody can see my screen. So amid the problem of urban giantism, displacement, especially in Asian countries, displacement is rising due to an increasing demand of infrastructure projects. So for the construction of any large-scale infrastructure project, the prerequisite is the acquisition of land or property, which raises the issue, and this also raises the issue of questionable land acquisition, as compulsory acquisition is inherently disruptive in nature, because it results in the violation of human rights, as people, they are displaced from their established homes, businesses, communities, and it also, it of course entails significant human costs in terms of deprivation of economic assets, their social quality is undermined, and of course their social networks, they're disruptive. So this occurs because there is hardly any formal framework in place that can, mitigate the impact of forced displacement, which is a consequence of government failure in establishing formal networks with the displaced communities. In addition to this, the resettlement plans, they are also designed arbitrarily. Those who have access to key political administrative personnel often, where informal means, for example, if somebody is friends with a political authority, or if somebody is working for the government, only those people, they exercise bargaining power, which results in suitable resettlement terms and receiving of adequate cash compensation. However, the irony is that very few displaced people, they have access to such key political positions in terms of resettlement and compensation at the cost of larger displaced population. And this is because mostly displaced families, they're unaware pertinent to the law which governs the acquisition, which is the Land Acquisition Act of 1894. Hence, against this backdrop, infrastructure-led development in urban areas, it does not always lead to just sustainability of its repercussions for the displaced families. If everybody can see the screen that I'm presenting the introduction, because I think that the presentation might be stuck.
No,
That's fine, Faria. You can go ahead, please.
Can you see the slides? Like the
Yes.
current slide is showing pictures of Orange Line train. Thank you. Okay, so as I've already mentioned, that the case study we have picked is a mass transit project, which is Orange Line train project located in Lahore, Pakistan, with an estimated cost of $1.62 million US. The length is 27 kilometers and it comprises 26 stations, 24 are elevated and 2 are underground. So this slide, it illustrates the map of Orange Line metro train project, especially the highlighted section. This is where the metro train, it headed underground. So 2 stations, they were constructed underground, which are Central Station and Anarkali Station. I'm sorry, the quality isn't good enough, but I hope you guys can see.
Faria,
We can't
Faria,
see the slide
I'm
that you're
afraid,
referring
yes.
to.
Can you see
the
it now?
slides are not moving, yes.
Yes.
Could you just
Now it's the map.
make it
Yeah.
full screen?
Okay, I think I won't
Yeah.
make it full screen because then it's not visible. So the highlighted part, it shows the construction of 2 underground stations, Anarkali and Central Station. So basically, while constructing these stations, cut and cover technology was employed, due to which everything that was on ground or on surface, it had to be demolished. And these areas, they were heavily populated and they were densely populated. Hence, maximum displacements occurred in these 2 areas. Over 200 families, they were displaced from these 2 areas. I've already explained this. So These people, they suffered losses of ancestral home and economic livelihoods, their social networks, their socioeconomic networks, they were disrupted, and disputes, they arose in the process of land acquisition and the provision of compensation, because the government used excessive force in evictions. There was lack of forewarnings to residents, and there was inadequacy of compensation packages. This led to escalation of tensions because of acquisition of private land by Pakistani authorities under Land Acquisition Act. The claim of local authorities was that compensation packages, they were provided at market value. Market value is higher compared to government value. On the contrary, the media, it reported that the evidence of forced evictions and excessive pressure, the provision of inadequate or no cash compensation to affected families and business owners, that was reported by the media, that most of the people, even if they were compensated, they were not compensated on the market value. And secondly, if they were, and secondly, some people, they didn't get any compensation at all because probably they were not, legal title holders. Against this backdrop, the research objective of our study was to explore the critical role of networks, both formal and informal, in determining the just, sustainable future of the displaced residents because of the infrastructure-led development in case of this mass transit project. We followed a qualitative approach. We have done qualitative content analysis, and the main purpose was to, organize and, get information and meaning from the data collected and to draw realistic conclusions from it. And we use semi-structured interviews as our data collection tool, and we interviewed 20 stakeholders, including the displaced families. So this is basically table showing our, targeted population, the stakeholders, and we conducted interviews with like 20 stakeholders comprising lawyers, legal authorities, media people, NGOs, activists, psychologists, and the displaced families. Due to lack of time, I'll just wrap up the presentation. So the main theme that emerged was again that those displaced families with higher access to political offices through informal means, like I've already mentioned, those who were friends with political authority or who used to work for the government, they possessed higher bargaining power. Hence, they were, beneficiaries to adequate cash compensation and suitable resettlement policies and plans, contrary to those who had no access to political offices. Then these are the quotations that I have, included, incorporated in my presentation. So coming on to concluding my presentation, the policy implications that we have come up with is that Land Acquisition Act, it has to be updated since it's a pre-partition law, and lots of changes have occurred over a period of more than 100 years, but no attempt has been made so far, to update it in accordance with the contemporary challenges that are being encountered during land acquisition. Secondly, this Acquisition Act, it has no clause pertinent to rehabilitation and resettlement policy. It is not catering to the, afflictions and the miseries that are encountered by the displaced families. There is no digitalization of land records, so we recommend that it is mandatory to digitalize the land records, which would eliminate accessing political offices through informal means. It would also improve access to property registry information, which would assist in making the process of compensation transparent and addressing the information asymmetries. Institutionalization of the process must be ensured. The authorities, they should intervene through formal means, because if informal means persist, few will get benefit in terms of cash compensation and suitable resettlement. And lastly, displaced people, they should be, meaningfully consulted and should have opportunities to participate in planning and implementing of the resettlement process, resettlement program. They have knowledge and awareness of what is happening during the process of displacement and resettlement. So thank you very much. And if you guys have any questions.
May I ask one, Faria?
Hi, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thanks very much for that. It's a very interesting presentation and quite informative as well. I have a couple of questions. You mentioned that businesses were affected. Did your research, did that involve speaking to some of those, or is it only households that you interviewed? So that's one question. Another one was you mentioned that the process for this underground part of the metro was to, if I understood it right, to demolish everything, dig the place up, put the stations there, and cover up, right? So then after you cover it up, so there should be some bare land, right? So who gets those? Or is it just bare land after they've done the underground bit and nobody came back to those places? That's two questions from me.
Okay, so yes, basically this is my MPhil thesis, and I've just presented a very just a little bit of some of my findings. So basically, I've interviewed around 100 displaced families as well during this process, and my main focus in this research was displaced households, not businesses per se. But of course, while I was interviewing these families, some people, they were also business owners in that same area. So their businesses, they were affected. Some people, they were staying on one floor, and their business was, they have set up their business in their same house, in the house that they were living. So once they were evicted, of course, their businesses, they were disrupted as well. And second question, I'm sorry, I didn't get what you exactly, you were trying to say. Because I just mentioned that because, when I visited the site where the underground stations, they're constructed. So before, construction of these stations, there were buildings that were, constructed on the surface that were constructed before the partition, the Bengali building, the Maharaja building, and they were, not in very good condition. So when they built the underground stations, so automatically they had to be demolished. Otherwise, they would have, just, they wouldn't be, they weren't in good condition to remain intact. So I hope I've answered your questions. The second one, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it well. Thank you. Any other questions? Or any other comments, questions?
Shall I go?
Yeah, sure.
What's the marker, or is it class, is it income, or is it ethnicity, or what determines a certain group to have access to higher officials?
Okay.
And the second one, in relation to this, how does local politics, like the vote bank, electoral politics, how does it play out, in relation to accessing, higher officials?
Okay. So the effect is basically they belonged to low socioeconomic income strata. Most of them, they were illiterate. They had no education. The people which I interviewed, the 100 displaced families whom I interviewed, but out of them, some people, they were educated. Some of them, they were employed as government servants some of them were employed in postal area or railway area, which are government departments. So these people, through their connections to the authorities, these people had access through political connections. And they had bargaining power in terms of, demanding good resettlement places, and in terms of, getting adequate cash compensation, because they had direct access to the government. On the contrary, some of the families, they were well off as well, and they used their wealth, or they used their other connections to get access to the political authorities. The second point is that local politics, how they play a role in all this. In the local politics, in our part of the area, in this society, basically the displaced families, they had no awareness pertinent to the Land Acquisition Act or the provision of compensation. Hence, the local government basically
Hi, I guess Fire has lost the connection. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So let me take that debate further by the time Fire will be hopefully back. Actually, the connections as far as at
sorry,
local level
I'm
is
back.
concerned. Yeah, Fire. Let me continue. Then.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
my
Okay.
internet.
So, what exactly the question was? Actually, it's more of a that certain class. Of course, they are marginalized in the sense that they have a very even if they have entitled to land before this whole episode of evictions and settlements, resettlements, all that. They belong to the lower strata in terms of the income levels. But that doesn't necessarily means that they are not politically smart. You know, people, they are smart people. They have that connections, as Faria already said to that those who have that some friends and families into in the government offices, particularly the executing agency, which is the Lahore Development Agency. They hold that agency holds the key because they are responsible to execute the whole project. So there are a few people they have that connections over there, so they have probably faced less information asymmetries. So they had that beforehand information. You know, in that whole episode, there are a series of notices given to them to evict the land. You know, to get the compensation and all that. So they got the better compensation in terms of the fact that they have less information asymmetries due to some sort of connections. And now coming back to again the question which I think Rajit asked before. Now what happened is that once the Orange Line is now operational over there, so the displaced people now they have given land somewhere else, not near to that, particularly those who have their businesses. Of course, people have their businesses over there. They have some small shops and all that, but they haven't given them a compensation in terms of the same shop, probably in that Orange Line somewhere, below the shops. They have given that shops somewhere away from that Orange Line. So but it's again quite interesting that they can lease that because there's quite a lot of spaces around still in metro stations. They can utilize those shops as well, but there's no as such plan of yet for Lahore Development Authority or the Orange Line metro train to get those shops to the ones who already have been evicted from over there. So that's it.
Zana, I think your questions have been answered. So I think we have, just our timing is up. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us for this session and for having such an insightful and such an informed discussion and conversation. Thank you so much, all the participants, all the presenters, the discussants. Thank you, Zana. Thank you, Asad, Dr. Asad, Dr. Aminawaz, Aisha, for such a informed session. And now I would like to wrap up. So everybody have a great day and all the best. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for hosting this.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.